Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. After days of unrest, Iraq's Prime Minister Adil Abdul Mahdi has asked for parliamentary support to reshuffle his cabinet. In a televised address, Mahdi called for dialogue with the protesters after a third day of anti-government demonstrations in Baghdad. He said there is no magical solution to the Iraq's problems with chronic bad government and endemic corruption. Mahdi pledged to pass a law granting poor families a basic income and other social support. The Prime Minister's announcement comes after 4,000 protesters rallied in Baghdad defying a government-enforced curfew. 31 people have been killed and over 1,000 injured in this week's mass protests. Russia says it is helping China build a missile attack warning system. Speaking at a conference in Sochi, President Vladimir Putin said the network will drastically improve China's defense capabilities. Only Russia and the US currently possess missile attack warning systems.
We are helping our Chinese partners build a MAWS, a missile attack warning system. This is a serious thing that will drastically increase the defense capabilities of the People's Republic of China, because at the moment, only the US and Russia have such systems.
President Putin says he is willing to work with the US even as President Trump's focus turns to his political troubles. In the meantime, Putin has urged Ukraine's President Zelensky to complete the peace process in eastern Ukraine. Moreover, Russian President Vladimir Putin says he is willing to work with the US even as President Trump's focus shifts to his political woes. Speaking at a conference, the Russian president said it is impossible to stop working with a global power like the US. He said the Washington's domestic situation must be taken into account. Putin also urged Ukraine's President Zelensky to complete the peace process in eastern Ukraine. In a further escalation of their trade war, the US has imposed another $4.4 billion in tariffs on Chinese exports. The Commerce Department says the punitive duties will target wooden cabinets and vanities. The decision came as US President Donald Trump announced trade talks with China will resume in Washington next week. Talking to reporters at the White House, Trump said he has a lot of avenues for action.
I have a lot of options on China, but if they don't do what we want, we have tremendous power.
The trade war between China and the US is not the only dispute threatening to disrupt global economic growth. After the World Trade Organization recently approved US tariffs against the EU for illegal subsidies to its aerospace industry, France has threatened to retaliate as well. Moving on, US President Donald Trump says the planned talks with North Korea will go ahead despite Pyongyang's test of a ballistic missile. Speaking to reporters at the White House, Trump said North Korea wants to hold negotiations to defuse the tensions. The United Nations Security Council is expected to hold closed-door talks today on the latest test. The meeting is at the request of Britain, France and Germany. North Korea is banned from ballistic missile launches by Security Council resolutions. Meanwhile, a team of North Korean negotiators has arrived in Sweden ahead of the talks with the US. The United States and North Korea will resume nuclear dialogue on the 5th of October. US President Donald Trump has said has also called on Ukraine and China to investigate his Democratic rival Joe Biden. This is similar to a request that has already triggered an impeachment inquiry in Congress. Speaking at the White House, Trump said Beijing should investigate Joe Biden and his businessman son Hunter Biden. President Trump said the Bidens should be investigated because what happened in China is as bad as what happened with Ukraine. Trump has accused former Vice President Biden of improperly assisting his son's business ventures in Ukraine and China, but he has not provided any evidence to support his allegation. Ecuador's President Lenin Moreno says the protests in the country's capital Quito and the city of Guayaquil are under control and will end. On Tuesday, the president declared a nationwide state of emergency when the controversial removal of oil subsidies was announced. Moreno defended the ending of the 40-year-old subsidy on oil as a necessity to improve the economy. Indigenous groups, students and unions have protested by barricading roads with rocks and burning tires. Moreno says protests will not be allowed to paralyze Ecuador.
A team of ministers in Quito have informed me that the areas of violence are being controlled almost totally, as is the case here in Guayaquil, where violence has also broken out. The state of emergency, ECU 911, has helped me manage operations. I have come here to Guayaquil.
Moreno has also decided to leave the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries on January the 1st, 2020, because it could expand the country's export base. With a population of over 17 million people, the country has a long history of political instability. Now moving on, 6 people have been killed after Typhoon Mitag battered South Korea with heavy rains and winds. Interior Ministry officials said a number of others are missing in the affected region. The storm hit the southern part of South Korea, triggering landslides and prompting floods. Over 100 homes have been flooded, with more than 1,500 evacuations in the southeast regions. Over 40,000 facilities have lost power. Mitag is the 18th typhoon of this year and the 7th to hit the Korean peninsula. The death toll in Al-Qaeda-linked militant attacks on Mali's military camps has risen to 38. Mali's defense ministry says almost 60 of their soldiers are still missing. The ministry says it has launched a joint operation in the region with forces from Burkina Faso. Officials have blamed the attacks on militant groups which have set up operations in parts of Mali. Meanwhile, families of Malian soldiers demonstrated in Bamako, demanding information about their missing men. Northern Burkina Faso has struggled with an insurgency which spilled over from Mali for past 7 years. Attacks and hit-and-run raids on remote villages have forced an estimated 300,000 people to flee their homes. These people have now found refuge in a land they don't understand, with provisions that can't sustain them. This report has more.
The Belen family had to flee their home 3 months ago. An estimated 300,000 people have been internally displaced by insecurity, linked to armed groups operating in the north and east of Burkina Faso. 74-year-old farmer and head of the family, Bouraima, took charge of leading his 42 relatives to safety.
The attackers were targeting everyone. They were looting our livestock and property, so we were forced to leave.
This small West African country has been contending with the unrest for the past 7 years. And the attacks are becoming increasingly frequent and deadly, with over 570 deaths recorded since the beginning of 2015. After 2 days on the road, the family found refuge in the village of Yagma, 30 kilometers north of the capital Ouagadougou. They are put up free of charge by the villagers.
Life is much better here. It's peaceful. Where we were, we couldn't sleep at night because they could arrive at any time. We had to keep an eye on things, even the children.
Though they no longer feel under threat, without livestock or land to cultivate, they struggle to meet their most basic needs. Instead, they wait for the day when a return to peace might allow them to return home.
More stories to follow right after a short break. Exoskeleton commanded by brain signals. And research returns to Canterbury Mountains. Welcome back. Unlocking the secrets of the past isn't always easy, especially when they are contained in papers too delicate to handle. Scientists at Britain's National Synchrotron facility have developed tools to unlock all that's kept in these fragile scrolls, which date back 2,000 years. More in this report.
In Britain, harnessing powerful beams of light will help unwrap old scrolls and provide new insights into the ancient world. 2 complete scrolls and 4 fragments from the so-called Herculaneum Library have been uncovered so far. The items were examined at the Diamond Light Source facility in Oxfordshire, home to Britain's synchrotron.
These scrolls are some of the only remaining material from antiquity. The library at Herculaneum was the only library that survived from antiquity, and because of that, the material inside is extremely valuable.
Electrons are accelerated to near light speed until they emit light 10 billion times brighter than the sun, making the text visible. By scanning the fragments where characters are visible, they hope to create a machine learning algorithm that will decipher what is written on the scrolls.
And eventually, when these materials are virtually unwrapped and there are virtual texts, scholars can then study these texts from anywhere in the world without having to travel all the way to the library in France or in Naples, and without having to move the materials out of storage in order to read them.
The data generated by the process will be analyzed by scientists at Kentucky University in the United States, who will help decipher the scroll's contents.
In a scientific breakthrough, a man paralyzed from the shoulders down has been able to walk using a pioneering 4-limbed robotic system. In trials, the 28-year-old tetraplegic commanded and controlled an exoskeleton using brain signals. He used sensors implanted in his head to send messages to control the movements of his paralyzed limbs. A 2-year trial brings doctors a step closer to helping paralyzed patients operate computers with thought alone. But for now, researchers say the exoskeleton is purely an experimental prototype and is far from ready for clinical use. At a time when most animal species are going extinct, Spain's brown bears are reclaiming the Cantabrian mountains. But this has only been possible because of the work of people and conservation organizations. More on brown bears in this report.
Cantabrian brown bears have been growing in number in Spain's mountainous northwestern province after almost vanishing. Their habitat was destroyed by the construction of roads and infrastructure, illegal hunting and poisonous bait left out for them. After a dedicated campaign by conservationists, the population has steadily grown, and the area now counts between 330 and 350 brown bears.
At the most eastern part of the Cantabrian Mountains, there were years when we didn't find any reproductive females, and some years it was only a female with her babies. So, they were in critical danger of extinction. Now, we are talking about 330 to 350 bears in a constant population, and they have an interesting reproduction rate. In the last years, we have detected more than 40 females with babies in the Cantabrian Mountains.
The Brown Bear organization had to allay myths about the animals, fence off hives and orchards, and run an information campaign in schools to stop poaching. New methods have been developed to allow bears and humans to live in harmony.
A bear is not going to learn that they can't touch the hives unless they receive an electric shock, and then it learns. But humans should be the ones adapting to these systems, and the administration should support cattle breeders and the population with these solutions.
Any harm or damage caused by the bears to livestock, beehives or fruit trees is fully compensated by funding from the European Union. Taken together, all of these ideas have helped the bear population thrive once more.
South Africa and Nigeria have signed 32 trade and cooperation agreements. The deals came during a meeting of Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari and South African President Cyril Ramaphosa. Both leaders said that they regret the recent violence against Nigerian nationals in Johannesburg and Pretoria. Buhari urged South Africa to quickly address the issue of violence against foreigners. Ramaphosa said the two countries have signed 32 agreements and memoranda of understanding. Financial markets across Asia are fluctuating as they grew nervous for the state of U.S. economy. Anxious investors are waiting for the release later in the day of the U.S. payroll data for September. Market confidence has been undermined this week by surveys pointing to a slowdown in the service and manufacturing sectors. Fears have deepened that the U.S.-China trade war is beginning to hurt growth in the world's biggest economy. As a result, international oil prices are set to record a large weekly loss, although futures have edged up today. Asia's richest stock market, Tokyo's Nikkei 225 index, is trading fractionally down. Political unrest has knocked 0.5% of Hong Kong's trade. And now the weather situation from around the globe. That's all for now. Further updates, stay tuned with Indus.